Hi VC, it's Rob here with another video, and this video I wanted to show albums that I bought as soon as they were released. So I want to show albums that I bought from being sort of 15 to maybe being around 24. When I didn't have a sort of great amount of money and I had to sort of make choices. Was I going to buy a record? Was I going to buy new clothes or money to go out? Football I was really into as well, so I had to make choices, and sometimes I decided not to buy a record as soon as it came out. Maybe I'd have waited a few weeks, a few months, and then maybe bought the album. But I've got 10 records here that I bought as soon as they came out, so I wanted to show them to you. The first one, because don't forget these days maybe it's a little bit easier, you can sort of stream music before it's released. Back in 1980, maybe there was music journalists writing about albums before they came out, maybe a little bit of a buzz, but I've never really been someone who sort of listened to journalists. I would have maybe bought the album because I was familiar with the artist, knew their earlier albums, or maybe gone with a hunch. But when you didn't have much money back in the 80s, I tended to buy albums that I was pretty sure I was going to like. So this album came out in March 1980, Nobody's Heroes by Stiff Little Fingers. So Stiff Little Fingers, I was aware of Inflammable Material, their debut album, because my older sister had it, and I was going to see Stiff Little Fingers at the Apollo in Manchester in March 1980. So I bought this album as soon as it came out. Features Gotta Get Away, At the Edge, Tin Soldiers, and Stiff Little Fingers were fantastic live, and this is a really good album. So the second album by Stiff Little Fingers, and one that I bought the weekend, the day that it came out. I was at school when this came out, so maybe I bought it on the Saturday. Second album I want to show came out in September 1980, so I started working in September 1980, so I would have had a little bit of money in my pocket, but not a lot. I think it was on about £30 a week. So I sort of decided that I wanted to buy the third album by the Skids. So I've spoken before about the Skids, a band I was into when I was at school. So I had a little bit of money and picked this up. So the debut album by the Skids, Scared to Dance and Daisy and Europa, were firm favourites of mine. This was a little bit of a drop-off. It came with a lyric sheet, and it actually had a free disc with it, so you got two for the price of one. Whether that sort of influenced me buying it as soon as it came out, I'm not too sure. Contains Circus Games, Goodbye Civilian and Woman in Winter, which weren't sort of big hits. Richard Jobson and Stuart Adamson were the main guys in the Skids. And yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with this, but kept it in the collection. The Absolute Game by the Skids from 1980. So in 1981, one of my favourite bands released the fourth album. Ghost in the Machine came out in October 1981, so I had the money to pick this up straight away. The first three albums by The Police, three of my favourite albums at the time. At this time, I would have probably had about maybe 20 albums. So it was quite a big deal when I bought an album. But The Police, Spirits in the Material World, one of my favourite tracks from this album. Invisible Sun was a lead-off track, which I wasn't as keen on. Very poppy. Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic was the number one. But I did like Too Much Information, Darkness. Is it Amiga Man? I love that as well. This is a pretty strong album, but it's probably my fourth favourite Police album. But I bought it as soon as it came out. Ghost in the Machine, October 1981. And there's the inner. So in 1982, this album came out, English Settlement by XTC. So in the UK, it came out as a double album. And when I got this album, I'd seen XTC Black Sea Tour, Drums and Wires I was familiar with, love that album. This was a little bit disappointing initially. The single Senses Working Overtime I thought was a bit of a classic, but it took a little bit of time. I can remember February 1982, dark nights, raining probably in Oldham. Took me about a month to really get into this album. Ball and Chain, No Thugs in Our House, Jason and the Argonauts, Fly on the Wall, It's Nearly Africa, Melt the Guns. I know this album off by heart. It's probably my second favourite album by XTC. Came out in February 1982 and I got it as soon as it came out. At the end of 82, sad news, the Jam was splitting and they released this live album, Dig the New Breed, in December 1982. So as soon as this came out, we were queuing around the block for this one. So this contains different sort of concerts, from early Jam concerts to later ones. So In the City's on here and Going Underground, The Start, That's Entertainment, Private Hell. It did contain Big Bird, which is a track I wasn't familiar with, Set the House Ablaze, one of my favourites. Filled with sadness when this came out. I can't describe how sad I was when I heard that the Jam was splitting up. It was, you know, I didn't cry, but I think I was pretty close. Of course, the Style Council sort of came out of the ashes of the Jam, but they were never the Jam, were they? And but when this came out, of course, I picked it up straight away. Another album I picked up as soon as it came out was Porcupine by Echo and the Bunnymen. This came out in February 1983. So Crocodiles and Heaven Up Here at the time would have been two of my favourite albums. So I picked this up straight away. I was a little bit disappointed with it. It had the Cutter on it, which was a single, Back of Love, Heads Will Roll. But overall, I was a little bit disappointed with it. But of course, I've kept it in the collection. It's over 40 years old now. I've always loved that jacket as well. So an album, another one that I picked up straight away was Porcupine by Echo and the Bunnymen. Now we're going to 85 now, and a band who in 84, 83 I'd seen about 10 times, and they were sort of my favourite band sort of to go and see live, because you could always sort of go and see them pretty cheap. They weren't a big band, but if you were a mod during that time, you were a fan of The Truth. Dennis Greaves, the front man from 9 Below Zero, formed The Truth in 83. And I was pretty obsessed with them. Used to go and see them with my girlfriend. But this didn't come out till 85. And by then, I just bought this out of loyalty, really. It's a little bit overproduced. Doesn't really sound like The Truth that I used to love, but I still picked it up. This came out in 1985. I can remember getting it and being slightly disappointed. At the end of 85, I picked up Easy Pieces by Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. Came out in November 85. So the album before this, Rattlesnakes, one of my favourites from the 80s. So when this came out, I was hoping that it would be similar. It was a little bit of a drop-off. Lead-off single I liked, Brand New Friend. Lost Weekend was okay. Cut Me Down. But it was an album that pretty soon I sort of gave up on. And I've not played it much over the last 40 years. I did play it this week, just to sort of familiarise myself with it. And it's got some nice moments, but generally, certainly a bit of a drop-off from Rattlesnakes. Easy Pieces from November 1985. 2 to go, and in 86, November, I was a big fan of Billy Bragg, and I was very political at this time after the miners' strike, and Margaret Thatcher was public enemy #1 for me. So Billy Bragg was someone I went seeing him live, and this is a strong album. Contains his single Levi Stubbs' Tears. There's Power in the Union, of course, very political. Great ballads though, like Warmest Room, gorgeous. But yeah, not as keen on Billy Bragg as he went into the 90s, but in the 80s, was a big fan. So, Talking to the Taxman about poetry was one that I picked up as soon as it came out. And finally, an album that I picked up as soon as it came out. Nobody cared about it, no one bothered about it, but I absolutely love the Bible. I caught them by accident watching the chart show on ITV, I think, or was it on Channel 4? Music show, and they showed a video of the Bible. So I investigated them, went to see them many times live when I turned out to be my wife. And this is a beautiful album. Eureka came out at the beginning of 1988. The lead-off track, Skywriting, is beautiful. Honey Be Good, Crystal Palace. If you ever see this in the bargain bins, I really recommend you pick it up. Nobody else seemed to care about the Bible. When you went to see them live, there was always a smattering of people, but they never sort of broke. Not a very good name for a band, the Bible, but this is a 10 out of 10 album for me. Eureka by the Bible. So 10 albums that I bought as soon as it came out. Some of them disappointing. A lot of them very good though. If you've got any comments about what I showed, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and bye for now.